Hi, folks. I'm Father Joe Grimaldi. You can call me Joe, and I'd like to welcome you to my podcast. But now, here's our host and friend, Ken Calvert.
Hello, everyone. I'm Ken Calvert alongside my good friend, Father Joe Grimaldi. Naples, Father Joe, we call him, or Naples Joe. Just like Moondoggy, I thought of a couple of different names to call him now that he's embedded in Naples, Florida. The Father Joe podcast, of course, with my friend, Father Moondoggy. The Father Joe podcast, proudly supported by Hoot McInerney Star Lincoln on 12 Mile Road, just east of Telegraph, home of the Star treatment. I want to talk to you about Lincoln Copilot 360, the next generation of safety on the road. It's a package of Lincoln's 5 most popular driver assist technologies. It's available in all 2020 models. It's a sophisticated extra set of eyes to help you keep your family secure on the road ahead. Now, this includes a 360-degree camera, active park assist plus, evasive steering assist, reverse brake assist, and adaptive cruise control with traffic jam assist, which includes stop and go and lane centering as well as speed sign recognition. This upgrade from the standard Lincoln Copilot 360 helps keep your journey seamless and stress-free. Stress-free driving, that's another reason to visit Hoot McInerney Star Lincoln on 12 Mile Road, just east of Telegraph. It's the home of the Star treatment. I got an email the other day for you. We were talking about it. It was a person not complaining about anything, but it was about the podcast that we most recently did about distractions in church. And he or she responded by saying, look, you should become a Protestant minister. That way you could get married, have a couple of kids, a dog, a house, a payment, a few other things, and maybe that way you wouldn't be so easily distracted. We've talked about this before. First of all, in Protestant churches, a lot of ministers actually have a contract with the church that pays them money.
Correct, yes.
And it can be a fairly decent income, right?
Correct.
And is that their full-time job?
Yes, it is. Well, let me ask you this.
Yeah.
When you speak about full-time job, there are Protestant churches that have that, but then there are Protestant churches that do not, and they just have people coming in at different times. But if they have a full-time pastor, it's their full-time job.
Now, does that include like our friends, the Lutherans and the Episcopals? The Episcopal Church is a lot like the Catholic Church, of course.
So is the Lutheran, yes.
So, all right, but is an Episcopal priest paid a salary?
Yes, he is.
Is a Catholic priest paid a salary?
Yes, he is.
How do they determine how that works?
Okay, when we speak about a salary, there is a stipend is better word than a salary, okay?
Okay.
For a Protestant minister, I can't swear on it, but I think they get a normal salary. For a Catholic priest, they have a salary that includes housing, food, insurance, very often a car. I would say that's about it. Whereas if you're a Protestant minister, and again, I can't swear by that, they might get a salary that's commensurate with the needs of the individual and his family. So a priest gets a salary, but it's more like a stipend.
It's rather Spartan in terms of the amount, let's just say that.
By comparison, sure.
All right. Where I'd like to go with this is I think people assume that Catholic priests at a higher-end parish do a lot better than a Catholic priest at perhaps an urban church.
Well, the priest's salary does not depend on where he is.
Okay.
It's one salary for all. We all get the same. So the thing is this, that whether you're at the high end or the low end of the diocese, you're each getting the same amount of money. Now, the way the question was phrased leads me to think that if you are in an area where arbitrary type contributions to the individual priest varies, maybe in a more wealthy parish, you might get a very decent thank you note for doing a funeral or a wedding, whereas maybe somewhere else they can't possibly afford a nice thank you note,
yes,
or whatever we're saying. So in that sense, maybe financially you're better off, but that's not why a priest is a priest.
Right.
He's not a priest to see where he could get the best salary. But when we speak about the basic salary, all priests get the same basic salary.
See, some people like to go on the attack for whatever reason. And I think this person was maybe intimating that. Like, what do you have to worry about? All you have to do is, get up and say a couple of masses and everything else is taken care of for you. You see, they don't realize at all how hard you work, Father Joseph Grimaldi. You are so incredibly busy, I can't believe it. And it's a pace that I couldn't keep up with. When I was on the air broadcasting, I made a very decent living. I made good money, and I also managed to provide myself with some decent items, a nice car every 3 or 4 years, you know what I mean? And I also had an IRA, and I had a pension that I was building into. Do Catholic priests, when they retire like you do you stop getting a salary? Do you have an IRA? Do you have a pension? What happens to the car then? What happens to the living accommodations then? What happens to the salary then when you're technically retired like you are?
It's so difficult to answer that because there's so many variables. But I'll give you a general idea.
Please.
Once you stop or once you begin your retirement, you certainly don't have the benefits of a nice parish. You don't have the benefits of a food allowance as such. You don't have the benefits of insurance in all areas. So it becomes more limited, let me put it this way. So that unless you were able to save along the line, well, you're going to have to be working pretty hard to make up for your needs. And so, yes, you can have an IRA. It's probably not the same as somebody else's, but at least it's a little bit of something. For example, I'll give you a general idea of a pension. The pension for a Catholic priest is around $1,500 a month, but that does not include food. It does not include housing, which means you really have to go out and try to do some work to be able to afford those things.
Wait. That's at the poverty line at that point. $1,500 a month. But
priests do not enter because he wants money. Okay, so
no, I realize that. I'm just saying. But even as grateful as we are and as devoted as you are, you still have to survive.
Oh yeah, we do have to survive, and this is why we do get a stipend for the masses that we say. So it's not like we're not being compensated for that. But by the same token, it's not equivalent to a regular salary, no.
Okay. It's funny you would bring that up because I was visiting with a friend of mine today, and we were talking about he had a Catholic wedding, and it was a friend of the family, and he was a bishop, and he did a beautiful job, and it was a wonderful, wonderful day, wonderful event. Well, when they got back from their honeymoon, he said, "We forgot to take care of the bishop, the family friend." And I said, "That's interesting because Father Joe Grimaldi and I have talked about that before in terms of, do you put a little something in an envelope at the end of the day and say, 'Thank you, Father, it was beautiful.'" And so that does happen, right? People will often...
It happens more than people think, okay? Because here's what I see anyway, and it's neither right nor wrong. People are forgetful. So they have all of these different people that they have to think about financially. For example, they have to pay the organist. They have to pay the soloist who will sing. They have to get the flowers, and some get very elaborate type decorations for the church. They have the special church that they want because they want the long aisle so that the bride will look beautiful coming down the aisle. And that's not even taking into account the amount of money that's spent on the wedding dress, on the tuxedos, the flowers, the reception, all of these different things. So very often, the last person they think about is the parish priest who does the wedding. Now, he's He doesn't ask for anything. And so it's up to the individual to say, well, I want to give him something because he did a great job. So you're right. It does happen more often than you think. However, most people do remember that ahead of time. So you will get a nice envelope with some money in it. If they were to go to elsewhere for that kind of a service, they would be told upfront that they have to give this much money to the presider.
Oh, no kidding.
I'm not speaking about Catholics, but in general.
All right.
Whereas the Catholic Church does not ask for that. The same thing for a funeral. Everything is at the will of the person who's contracting the service.
I apologize, but I would think that more often than not, people would assume that with a funeral, that's the last thing on their mind is to give the priest a little something extra. Do you know what I'm saying?
It happens, but not
of course.
too often.
Really? No kidding. Okay.
Well, according to where you are. For example, I'm in a place where people are conscientious about that, maybe because they have to deal with finances on a regular basis. So they have a list in front of them of all the different people they have to, in quotes, pay. With the weddings, there's other things involved than just the wedding itself. There's the preparation because you meet with the couple at least 3 to 6 times, depending on the situation. So again, that's something to be taken into consideration. So I think people do a good job about that, generally speaking. But of course, in a parish where people are hurting, and it's a beautiful thing to be able to have that couple experience a beautiful wedding without having to worry about getting paid. So the church does not ask for any money, but if it's offered, usually the priest will take it and be very grateful for it.
You're right about the counseling, too. I don't think people take into account the energy and the time and the commitment that goes into sitting down with couples who are about to be married, that particular session or sessions, and also the time you spend with the family getting ready for the funeral, because you never want, as you've said so many times before, you just don't want to go up there and do a off-the-shelf funeral. I didn't know the fellow, but I'm told he was a great guy. You know, you don't want to ever hear that.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I did hear that once, but it was outside a Catholic church, and I don't mean to demean anyone, but the guy gave one of the most beautiful eulogies I've ever heard. And it was a minister, and he was just phenomenal. And at the very end, he said, now, take into account, I never met the man. I didn't meet the man. I don't know much about the man. And I was kind of like, really? You sounded like you grew up together. You sounded like best friends. Again, you want to spend time with the family, as difficult as that may be. Or maybe it's helpful.
It's helpful because, for example, if a person lived a very fruitful life and lived to be 98 years of age, what a wonderful experience that was. She or he lived that life, was generous with the people around them, sensitive to the people around them, did a great job in whatever they did. That's a joyful event. It's really a celebration of life in a true sense. Now, when somebody who's 17 passes away, and with all the potential that you can imagine, it's got to be one of the most difficult things to get up there and speak about the next life. When the family is there, really devastated by the death of such a young person, either man or woman. Yes, it depends on the situation. It could be a tremendous celebration, but you only get that from what is said and what is unsaid when you meet with the family, because very often what is not said is very loud.
Yeah, absolutely. I have another quick question for you on
Sure.
all of this. So, as a young priest, is it better for him to start in perhaps more of an urban area and literally become a bit more used to the community and doing things more for the joy and the love of God and Jesus? I guess I'm just asking, is it better for a young priest start in a more urban area church so that he can understand the humility of the parishioners, and eventually move on from there?
I don't think one is better than the other. All I'll say is this, that a young priest should have as much experience in all areas as possible before he becomes a pastor, because it's only then that you begin to realize what the needs of the human beings who are in front of you have. And I think it's great when someone has the experience of a poor parish as well as the experience of a wealthy or well-to-do parish, because they get the experience of a little bit of both. You know, if the priest is going to be strong at what he does, I think he needs to know the people in all areas.
I'm still fascinated by the fact a retired priest makes maybe, what did you say, 15?
Yeah, but now don't forget the retired priest also helps out at different places, and therefore, usually, if they have the health and so on.
Yeah, and has a pension. Yeah, I know that. Yeah. And of course, you have the ultimate senior care if you need to be in a facility. There are facilities for priests and nuns, correct? I mean, so your health is basically...
Not that I know of.
Really? In other words, if you're starting to fail in health, you don't have a facility that a Catholic priest would go and...
No, we don't have a facility, but I think...
I did not... Are you kidding me? I didn't know that. I just assumed that there would be sort of like a veterans hospital, if you will. I mean, analogous to a veterans hospital? No kidding.
No, I mean, we all have Medicare and sometimes Medicaid, and so that this way those things are taken care of the way they are for other people as well. I think what we might be thinking about is one of the things priests have an advantage in is the friendships that he develops throughout his life. And I can say this much, and I am so grateful for this, that I know that if I had to be in the streets, they wouldn't leave me there. I have a lot of friends that would make sure that I was not in the streets.
Oh, heck yeah. So we got room for you here.
All I can say is this.
At the Casa de Calv.
That's the that's the given, if you want.
Final question for you. Is it a nice thing for us to occasionally say to the priest, hey, can I buy you lunch or can I buy you dinner?
Actually, that does a couple of things, not just to save a few pennies, but it also allows you to know the individuals a little bit better.
Yeah.
Because very often, if you're speaking a homily on Sunday, you're speaking to a mass of people, whereas getting to know the individuals is always so much better for both the individual as well as the priest, because it gives the individual an insight into what a priest's life is like, much more than he gets from afar.
Yeah.
So that serves a couple of purposes. I think you meant that question to say, well, that would help financially.
Yes.
But it's more than the help of financial. I think it's getting to know people that way is a very important aspect.
I think people might be a little uncomfortable, would love to ask, but are afraid to.
I think because they're in awe, if you want, of the collar. And you have to realize that priests are like anybody else in so many different ways. Yeah, they're doing something that's special, saying Mass, leading people in prayer, counseling, and so on. And yet they're human beings. They walk the same earth that everybody else walks.
Yeah.
They have the same temptations that everybody else has. And therefore, they're vulnerable just like anybody else is when it comes to temptations and things of that sort. So I think we have to remember that priests have the same human qualities as anybody else.
And they also get hungry morning.
Oh, and they also get hungry.
Morning, noon, and night.
I say, that's not always that's not the main thing that priests have to go through.
Well, from now on, folks, if you learn one thing today, if you've ever thought about inviting one of the priests at your church to the breakfast, lunch, or dinner, walk right up after Mass and say, hey, let's say you and I get together for lunch sometime. You pick the place, Father.
That'd be great. I think that would be a good thing.
Well, we ought to do it sometime. We've been doing these podcasts long enough. It all started with a breakfast at a Coney Island, of all places.
I'll never forget.
Where I said, hey, you want to do a podcast? And you said...
I don't even know what the heck a podcast is.
Well, with that said, we're well over 200 right now, and we got another one coming your way. But for today, That's it from us here at WKEN, and we'll send Father J.O.E. back to work now at his church at St. Elizabeth Seton in Naples, Florida. Look forward to seeing you next time on the Father Joe Grimaldi podcast.
I look forward to it also. Thanks. This is Father Joe Grimaldi, and I look forward to seeing you next time on the Father Joe podcast.
If you'd like, you can email us. It's frjoepodcast@gmail.com. That's frjoepodcast@gmail.com. We're also on Facebook. Simply search Father Joe Grimaldi. And thanks for listening, everyone.